I saw an ad in Competition Press AUTOWEEK that a magazine called CARLIFE was looking for an engineering editor. And so I look up CARLIFE, and CARLIFE is essentially the sister publication of Road and Track. John Bond and Elaine Bond bought Road and Track for its debts. The magazine actually started in a place where I grew up. It's Long Island. So I tell people, two great things came out of Long Island: Dan Gurney and Road and Track. So the guys who started Road and Track did 3 or 4 issues before it just started foundering. And so John and Elaine Bond, and John was the technical side, Elaine was the business side. They bought it. They moved it out to California. CARLIFE, John loved CARLIFE more than he loved Road and Track. And why is that? Road and Track, by the time I got there in 72, was a cash cow. They were making a ton of money with Road and Track because of what had happened in the car world and the growth of performance cars, sports cars, etc. But John loved CARLIFE because he had gone through GMI. He had been and worked at General Motors. And so he loved the Detroit business more than he really loved the import business. But the magazine wasn't as successful and it wasn't as big, but they were looking for an engineering editor to replace a guy who was going. In fact, it was interesting because it was a guy by the name of John McKibben. John McKibben was a Chrysler engineer who worked for I'm going to say Golden Commandos. It could have been the Ram Chargers, but it was the 2 factory racing teams that were run out of Chrysler by engineers. So they were factory, but they were all engineering guys at Chrysler who did the drag racing with the Golden Commandos and the Ram Chargers. And John McKibben was part of that. When he left, he was the engineering editor of CARLIFE. He got hired away by the NHTSA to do the first vehicle safety car that the DOT did. And he took what he used was he took a 1970 Chrysler C-Body, which was one of the big ones with all the tumble home that they had back in those days, and they couldn't sell them until General Motors came out with similar designs the next year. And he had a facility out in the Ontario area where he was developing this car. So they needed another engineering editor, and that's how I found that note. The guy I interviewed with the then editor of CARLIFE magazine in Detroit, but they hired the perfect guy who was already in LA. It was a guy by the name of Dave Bean. He worked for Air Research. They were in a turbocharging company right in the business. He had a Lotus 7 that he raced, and he was a very good racer, and he was a hell of a rider. So he could have had a career in that business forever, except for one thing. And it was one thing that doomed him from a career in writing. And that one thing was deadlines. He couldn't make deadlines. So a year after they hired him, they let him go. And they came back and found me, and the then editor, Alan Girdler, hired me to become the engineering editor. And so that was in 1970.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.